Okay, the recording has started. So today we do have a packed agenda.
Oh, speaking of the audit, I know
Please mute yourself.
down.
Thank you. This is our agenda for the day. We're going to start with announcements, actually one announcement. And then we're going to have some presentations from your colleagues about strategies and tips to achieve higher EFL gains. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some national and statewide data on MSG and performance, which it's some information I got from Octave and then some internal information, and I think it may be interesting. So the first item on the agenda today is an announcement that the professional development system is doing a needs assessment. And we really need your help with this. We're really trying to figure out what you and your programs need from us for professional development. So to that end, there are two surveys, one's for admins and one's for staff and volunteers. The admins will be getting an email from Destiny Simpson later today that has a link to the survey for the admins, and the staff and volunteers can look for one of those constant contact emails from the professional development system that should also come out, I believe, later today. So that's going on. We'd love for you to be able to get that done by February 29th, by the end of the month. I think I looked at it. I think the estimate is that it'll take you like 15 minutes. It's nothing that you have to do preparatory work for, get data together like the surveys that Amanda sends you. This is just kind of, there's a lot of, yes, we want this. No, we don't want that, that kind of thing. So I think you'll be able to complete it in a short amount of time. So I will thank you in advance for doing that. Now we're going to have presentations from your colleagues about strategies and tips to achieve higher EFL gains. Our presenters today come from Lehigh Carbon Community College, the New World Association, Literacy Pittsburgh, and Intermediate Unit 1, in that order. I will, for those of you that are presenting, I will be driving the presentation. I have all of your PowerPoints loaded into the larger PowerPoint. So why don't we get started with Lehigh Carbon Community College? Allison.
All right, fantastic. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak. Mary said that it would take me 3 to 5 minutes, so I'm gonna hold to that.
Excellent.
Go ahead, Christine. So last program year, we did a pretty thorough data and evaluation plan where we did a lot of analysis on a ton of data related to EFL gains and overall student retention, and through instructor surveys, student surveys, CASAS exam, and CASAS competency research, and of course our analysis of our tables 4 and 4B. We came to a couple of conclusions. One being that classes, even though they're based on NRS level for us, competencies for test form levels are different based on the test form level. And instructors, based on instructor surveys, were feeling overwhelmed that if they had students on multiple forms in a class, and they were not quite sure where to kind of focus their instruction, if they had 3 or 4 different test levels represented in a class, even though it was the same NRS level. Remote instructors were feeling specifically overwhelmed by looking for other digitally interactive activities that would reinforce CASAS competencies. And what we also found was we have instructor website and Google Share drives with so many of our lesson plans, activities, things like that, resources, scope and sequence, but it was being underutilized. Instructors time and time again were trying to reinvent the wheel and not necessarily going to some of the resources that were already being provided and there for them. Next slide, please, Christine. Thank you. So we added some additions to this program year. One is we added the CASAS listening exam. So now we're doing reading, life and work reading. We're doing listening, and then obviously we're doing CASAS goals on the ABE side, but we really focused in on ESL specifically for our research. We also applied and received a grant outside of PDE funding to purchase Burlington English subscriptions. We were really looking for a subscription for our supplemental distance learning. We were using free services, and we felt like we needed to up our game with that. And then based on student and instructor comments, we created a once a week class exchange that focused on CASAS competencies, in which we were moving people in different NRS levels, but in the same test form. So next slide, please, Christine. So once a week we move, we have a group of students that move to different classes based on their test form. Students work with their new groups for about an hour and a half. Test A and AX, they're in a class together. Test B is together, and test C or D are together. And students and this allows students a chance to interact with different groups of people in their classes, and possibly a new instructor that they've never had to work with before. And it allows the teacher an opportunity to focus on those competencies specific to those test forms and be able to do activities and lessons based on those competencies. Next slide, please, Christine. This helped us in a number of ways. One, it allowed students to meet more students and instructors that they didn't necessarily work with previously. We were also finding in our research that we had a handful of students every year to, I guess, put it nicely, would sometimes not do as well as they could on the test because they wanted to remain with their current teacher. And so we did a lot of work with exposing students to higher level teachers, and then allowing them to, go back and see their other instructors, so they didn't feel like they were kind of leaving their other instructors behind, but it also gave them an opportunity to get to know their instructors prior to starting their classes. So we found that as a very helpful tool just in itself for contributing to our increased EFL gains. Instructors were really happy. They only had to focus on 1 or 2 form levels of competencies. That really allowed them to kind of step back, be creative in the forms in which they were, adding digital literacy components to it, which was really nice. Based on this, we also had an in-house marketing campaign to reintroduce instructors to our resources, and not just like, hey, remember, here they are, but like working on them a lot one-on-one, getting them to the right places, making sure they knew how to utilize them, making sure that they would pull them apart and how they would add their own things to create their own style or environment to their classroom. So we did a lot of work specifically on that, which contributed to our increased EFL gains. We did a lot of professional development specifically on Burlington English. We had the Burlington English folks here a number of times. We have done a lot of work with instructors using it, and not just as a supplemental distance learning platform, but also as well, if you're going to use it, this is the way that you use it. This is how you're going to get optimal use of this platform. And then we really worked with our digital literacy specialist, who prioritized working with remote instructors on competency resources to make sure that they felt included, and they felt that they had enough resources to create their own stuff. And that's it for me. Like I said, I did pretty well keeping to the 5-minute time frame.
Thanks, Allison. No, thank you. That was great. Mary just dropped Allison's email address in the chat for anybody who wants to direct questions, privately to Allison. We're going to have time for questions at the end of all 4 presentations. So if you want to put questions in the chat now, feel free to go ahead, and we'll save them all up and address them at the end of the presentations. All right, so right now we're going to move on to our next presentation, which will be provided by New World Association of Immigrants from Eastern Europe. And they're going to talk about some strategies to achieve EFL gains. So New World, feel free to unmute yourself and take it away.
Okay, a couple of words about us. You can move to the next slide, Christine, please. So when we think about strategies, we first take into account who our students are. New World Association offers family literacy services to other than English language speaking families. So what are the advantages of our participants? They are literate in their native languages. Most demonstrate at least basic reading comprehension skills. All of them have basic learning to learn skills and have some previous working experience in their countries of origin. The most important thing is that they are highly motivated to learn English, to be able to communicate in different life situations, start employment, and help their children to succeed in school. Next slide, please. What are their issues? They face challenges with listening and speaking in English. While they understand something through reading at the very beginning, listening is the most difficult skill to develop, and speaking, is the reverse side of listening. They are not aware of American workforce culture and the system of education, healthcare and financial system, and the basics of American laws. And they need to be more familiar with appropriate manners and behaviors. They lack awareness of local community resources and business and personal connections. Next slide, please. So we have to take into account who are our family literacy staff members. We're happy to have staff that have multiple years of experience in adult basic education, and they are trained in administering standardized assessment and conducting instructional and supportive services. They are resourceful and dedicated to providing services to immigrant and refugee community. They are able and eager to identify the differences between various languages and English, to pinpoint difficulties in reading, writing, and speaking that may be due to interference of rules and formats from the student's first language. Next slide, please. So taking into account who are our students, we have to explain why do we use CASA's Life and Work series reading paper version. Number one, to reduce the level of stress of our students and make them feel more comfortable, especially during the pre-assessment time. And a little joke. The human brain is amazing. It functions 25 hours a day, every day since we were born, and only stops when taking an exam. So that's why, it is important to remember that the stress is felt by everyone, and not to say anything about other than English language speakers. So during the initial interview, most prospective candidates report they have huge issues with English language comprehension through listening. So to make them more comfortable, we switch to reading. Most program candidates have some comprehension through reading skills and are familiar with multiple choice testing, which is now used worldwide. Some do not have an adequate language or adequate level of digital literacy skills, and that stop them to take tests on computers. Next slide, please. So what is very important to us as an agency? The goal is to create a welcoming, a positive environment, including welcoming and positive testing environment. And so there are two factors that influences it. It's physical environment. Then we have to prepare the classroom in the proper way. filtering out any unnecessary noise and distraction, ensuring the appropriate temperature, lighting, and ventilation in the room, preparing the timer, and we do not place any clocks on the walls, and they may cause anxiety in some students, and prepare the whiteboard for demonstrations. When test takers come to the physical environment which they feel is prepared for them, it's very important. And emotional environment, greeting test takers warmly, communicating in a polite and quiet manner, and explaining why a test is administered, and encouraging them to do the best. Just some things. So we have, of course, to follow all the CASA's instructions, which are preparation, test security, getting started, testing procedures. That's why it's very important that every administrator of the test has to be prepared in the best possible way. Next slide, please. Test scoring accurate range. I know that Irina is very careful with this because it's very important to give a student an appropriate pretest, and we pay special attention to test scores within an accurate range. If a student scores below or above the accurate range on pre or post test, we retest them with a test that falls within their scoring range. We observe that sometimes appraisal does not define the appropriate level of pretest, so a student must be reassessed with a different level of test. Accuracy is important. Next slide, please. Test results for students and teachers. Again, I would like to start this part of presentation with a joke. When the father asks his son, "How did your English test go?" Jan says, "I got nearly 100. Father, what do you mean about 100? The questions did not give me a trouble, just the answers." So we don't have to say that for our ESL learners, not only the answers are in trouble, but they may misunderstand some questions. So what do we do to inform students? We inform students about test scores and why, to explain what class level they will be placed, and inform students in what content areas they need improvement using student performance by competency CASA's materials. CASA's test results also inform teachers. What should I teach? What materials should I use? Of course, it's not CASA's. Next slide, please. What we need to teach for post-test success. Using CASA's life and work reading series test requires teachers to teach vocabulary related to the content areas and regularly expose students to reading comprehension activities. Next slide, please. Teaching vocabulary. What vocabulary we teach? Number one, it's common everyday words, words that are used across discipline and content areas, like prepositions and conjunctions, and we gradually introduce infrequently used common content-specific words, which means from Tier 1 to Tier 3. How we teach vocabulary? Different ways. Pre-teach the words to support the text to be read, teach prefixes and suffixes, synonyms and antonyms, phrases and word collocations, idiomatic expression. And of course, they are not taught separately, they are taught in the context. And what we expect students to be able to do with this new vocabulary: understand a new word in the context, define a word, select an appropriate word for use, know multiple meaning of the word, use the, I'm sorry, there is a typo, the word correctly in writing and speech. We also explain to students that regular reading, including reading with children, contributes to strong vocabulary development. Next slide, please. So teaching reading comprehension strategies that we use, I don't think are the agencies use different. This is answering and generating questions, making inferences and predictions, recognizing story structure, comparing and contrasting, using graphic organizers, sequences, differentiating between fact and opinion, determining the main idea, important facts, and supportive details. So you see that it's related to CCR standards. Next slide, please. So other factors that contribute to successful outcomes are positive learning environment in which students can work as an individual and individuals and team members. They are supported and praised for academic success and have their own voices and choices. Students' commitment, dedication, and motivation. So we discuss this a lot with students at the orientation. And in the classroom, we tell them that our success is their success, number one. So choice of textbooks that are correlated with CASAS competencies and CCR standards, and authentic materials related to CASAS competencies, such as advertisements, forms, application schedules, etc. Thanks. I believe this is all. We don't have the next slide.
Well, thank you very much, New World. Was that Marina or Irina that was speaking? I couldn't.
Marina.
Hi, Marina. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Mary will be putting Marina's email in the chat for anyone who wants to contact her privately. And you can also continue to put questions in the chat, and we will address them at the end of the presentations today. Thank you very much. Okay. So now we're going to move on to, I believe, Literacy Pittsburgh. And I believe Lori Como is going to talk to us a little bit about strategies and tips to achieve higher EFL gains.
Thanks, Christine. I'll be sharing the microphone with some of the team here. So thanks a lot. So you can go to the next slide, please.
Okay.
So for us to achieve EFL gains, we've made it a priority for the agency to be very data-driven. So we look at data, and we always have a program improvement goal around improving our EFL gains. So as I said, we're very data-driven, and we've taken a little bit of a holistic agency approach to that and developed a data system to help us do that. But we have organizational goals that drive our outcomes. And these organizational goals also help us at the agency level to set monthly targets to achieve EFL goals. So we're looking at the data every month to see how we're going and to meet that EFL goal that we have at the end of the year. And then we break that down into team level goals, metrics, and plans. And then each individual staff person who does assessment or teaching or coordinating also has individual goals with targets to help meet those outcomes at the end of the year. Next slide, please. So today, we are a large agency that has a sub-grantee. We have the 064 grant, the tutoring grant, and a family literacy grant. Next slide. Oh, sorry, you're there. So we will hear from each of those teams as to what they do to help achieve these EFL goals. And we use the BEST Plus, the BEST Literacy, and the TAPE assessments for our agencies. Next slide.
So I'll chime in here. My name is Gretchen Costello, and I'm the Director of Adult Education at Literacy Pittsburgh, which means that I oversee our class-based instructional teams. So I'm just going to share some of the strategies that we use as part of our team to help contribute to the greater agency goals. One strategy is that teachers go through assessment training in addition to our coordinators that are leading the test themselves, and they'll go through the assessment training for the relevant assessments to their population that they're serving. This gives them a better ability to use the assessment to inform their instruction, and they can always assist with TABE post-testing if needed, if they are leading that type of instruction. So it just gives us a little bit of extra bandwidth if needed for group testing sessions and things like that, to have more staff that can contribute to those efforts. Each teacher is assigned a post-testing point person, and this is important because we have two very large teams at Literacy Pittsburgh, a large team of teachers and a large team of enrollment coordinators, and that can get slightly confusing. Who do I reach out to when my students are ready for a test? So we give everybody a point person, and they always know who to ask when it's time for the students to test. So it's just a regular relationship, kind of a partner system. So that's one strategy we use. And the enrollment coordinators that's assigned to the given teacher will push into their classes to either lead the assessment or schedule the student for an upcoming testing session. So it may depend on the student's availability, the technology they have, what's going on in the class at the given moment, but we try to make it as convenient as possible for the students. They can, if it's easy enough to test before, during, or after class, we'll do it that way. Or if it's easier to just schedule them for a group testing session, we'll do that. And then we have regularly scheduled planning breaks between each class session. So we can capitalize on those. So our teachers and enrollment coordinators can coordinate to have the class continue during the testing or during the planning sessions so that students keep coming and they can take the class. We know they're available because they come to class regularly. So it keeps the momentum going for students, and it helps, because we know their scheduling is such that they should be available to attend at that time. Next slide, please. We make it everybody's responsibility to be looking at the data, not just administrators, but really all across the board. Everybody is regularly looking at our data. And to help with that, we build it in, we bake it in, we make it not an extra thing that's tacked on, but really a fundamental way of operating. So we do that in many ways, but one way is that we build it right into our instructor monthly report form. So we design this report form, it's just for internal use, but one of the first things they do when they fill out their monthly report is they check a dashboard that we have created with our database system that we use. And then they can see, instructors can see in real time how they're doing with enrollment, EFL gains, post-testing percentages, outcomes, and all of that. And then we ask them to reflect on that data and identify actions that they can take. And it's kind of teacher driven. So it's not somebody from higher up telling them, you must do this, you must do that, but really them being creative and coming up with ideas for how they can help improve their various numbers. And the teachers are always zoomed in on the individual students and how certain outcomes are coming into play, but this helps them zoom out and see how it is playing into a greater agency percentages and things like that. So they're always in the know about how they're doing. And so I know it's very small, but on the right is just an example of what that looks like. And teachers are grabbing and reporting on their numbers and then coming up with their own analysis. And then we'll discuss that during monthly check-ins. Next slide, please. This is just an example. And again, I know this is very small, but what I'll say is the dashboard is kind of our agency dashboard. So it's using our database system. It tells them in real time the number of students that they're serving, the number that are enrolled, so persisting, rates of persistence, not just in their individual classes, but if they're co-enrolled, if they have a reading and a math class, seeing how they maybe kind of counting as enrolled via multiple classes. And they can filter the dashboard based on their name. So they could just see only their 4 classes or whatever, however many classes they have, and just see their unique data. And next slide, please. In addition, they can see their EFL gains per class. And I think if you go back one slide, please. Just to show you that they can also see their EFL gains in real time. And then we have the dashboard calculating it into percentages so that that's how they're able to do their monthly reporting and say, X class is at 43% of student gains, and they'll be able to keep track and really see how they're contributing to the agency outcomes. And next slide, please. And then I'll just speak briefly about how we work closely with the enrollment team, as I mentioned, so they're partnered up The enrollment team, some strategies they use, they plan post-testing sessions that allow for group and batch testing because we serve so many students. We're quite a large program being here in Pittsburgh. For example, we have 731 enrolled students in our class-based programs as of today. And so that makes a high volume of students, and we're trying to strategize and make it efficient to test that high volume of students. To help with that, we flag students. So of course, 60 hours is often the test publisher recommendation for post-testing, but we try to flag them at 50 hours because by the time you coordinate the test and you have that planned into the near future, the student is likely approaching 60 hours. So we try to flag them early and then pay attention as well to the points to the next level to really strategize the students that are most ready to be tested. And we also have a system where teachers can ping their enrollment coordinator when they observe a student that may be not due for testing yet, but their skills and class performance indicate that they may be ready for a test. And that helps us position students into the best class level for them. So of course, we always document when that's the case, but we have different pathways and we build systems for ourselves so that we're able to really coordinate efficiently when students are ready for testing. All right, next slide, and I'll hand it over to the next person.
Hi, everyone. This is Hannah Gerby-Schucht. I'm the Director of Volunteer Programs at Literacy Pittsburgh. I am Gretchen's counterpart, where she is class-based, I am tutor-based. So we have 7 program coordinators working directly with volunteers and tutors in their individual areas. And just FYI, we are currently at 463 students enrolled in the tutoring program. Each of these individual program coordinators will end the year with between around 80 to 150 enrolled students. So just an FYI of the caseload these coordinators are working with. We have dashboards available for all of the coordinators, which I will go over soon to see what that looks like. And each coordinator is responsible for scheduling, administering, and tracking post-testing for all of the students in their individual areas, though lots of the students that are tape tested are put into those batch sessions that are hosted by our enrollment coordinators. We also have monthly reports that go to me, and we speak about it on a regular basis, individually and as a team. And we also have some strategies for identifying students that are either close to EFL gains, as well as identifying students that maybe are leaving our program to make sure they're tested first. You can go to the next slide, please. So this is an example of an individual program coordinator's dashboard. As Gretchen mentioned, it's a little difficult to see. However, the top left-hand corner is 60 hours since last test. So this is calculated any student that is now eligible for a post-test with a big reminder next to it to contact any student for post-testing every Monday. Many coordinators do it more often than that as soon as they show up on the dashboard, but we have built-in weekly reminders to do that, as well as some real-time data of the number of students that have been post-tested in an individual area and a number of students making gains. You can go to the next slide. This is an example of a coordinator monthly report that they fill out and then send to me on a monthly basis. And each coordinator has individual target enrollment and target EFL gains for whichever month they're filling out. And they track their own data. So they're tracking the number of enrolled students, less than 12 hours, the percentage of students post-tested, and gains being made by students. So coordinators are well aware of their data, how they're tracking compared to what their targets are on a monthly basis. Next slide. And finally, I had mentioned some being able to prioritize or strategically test students. Again, this is so hard to see, I apologize, but this is a dashboard that shows students that are within either 5 points or 15 points to the next EFL level based on their last test. So if it's Best Plus or TABE, it's within 15 points to the next EFL level. And if it's Best Literacy, it's 5 points to the next EFL level. So this allows for some prioritizing of coordinators of what students are close to making gains. The only thing that I haven't listed here is that coordinators also receive tutor weekly reports that they look over and see, are any students, are the tutors talking about how the students have been making great progress? or are they moving? Are they leaving? So they read over those weekly reports to see if there's anybody else that they should prioritize for testing. Next slide, please.
Okay, so Caitlin Griffiths, Director of Child and Family Programs. So our program works well with the class-based and tutoring program. We do roughly the same thing with our reports. We do track our data weekly through Salesforce, like Hannah's charts that she showed you. Every week, I send out a data email to teachers outlining our programming, how many hours they need for enrollment in each area of family literacy, and then how many hours are needed for 40 hours of PE and 25 hours of ILA, and then who needs a testing appointment or a goal update so that I am able to meet with the students, whether it's dropping into class or having the teacher help me schedule an appointment outside of that. We also have very open communication about issues in attendance. So teachers let me know after every single class who has not attended so that we can help barrier reduction and make sure students are succeeding in attending classes. You can move to the next slide.
I think that's the end of the presentation that I received. Was there more information?
There was more from IU or from Goodwill. There were other slides. I'm not sure what happened.
Oh.
We can share them if you want to send them out, or I can send them over.
Okay, send them over to me and put them in the PowerPoint and redo the PDF for everybody.
Okay, thanks, Christine. And we have our contact information in those as well.
Okay,
Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, so next up is IU1, and I believe it's going to be Rachel and Chelsea, talking to us about what they're doing for achieving some good EFL gains. So I'm going to let you unmute yourselves and take it away.
Okay, thanks, Christine. This is Rachel Zolkowski. I'm the program administrator at Intermediate Unit 1, and Chelsea Snyder, one of our head coordinators, is going to be joining me to talk about our strategies and tips that we use for achieving EFL gains. Next slide, please. Okay, just a little background on who we are at IU1. We serve the southwest corner of Pennsylvania.
Rachel, your voice has gotten very quiet all of a sudden.
Okay. Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just lean into my computer. We serve southwestern Pennsylvania, Fayette, Washington, Greene, and Westmoreland counties. It's a very large geographical area. We are contracted to serve 497 students a year. We also have a small tutoring grant where we serve 25 students. Last year in our program year, we were able to exceed all the EFL ranges in Table 4 except for 3. And that I'll talk a little bit further about. That's all in our ESL population. We have always tended to be a very large ABE population, very small ESL population. And like many parts of the states, that is beginning to change. Our overall EFL gain in our Table 4 was 87% last year. And in terms of assessments used, we used the COSIS goals for our ABE population. And then for the ESL population, we used both the COSIS Life and Work Reading Test. In a very limited fashion, we used their listening test also, and then we used the BEST Plus. So today I want to talk, Chelsea and I are going to talk to you about 3 different strategies that we use, and they're listed here on the slide. We've really tried to use our assessment coordinator to help with the post-testing area. We have some diagnostic tools and targeted instructional goals that Chelsea will talk to you about. And Chelsea will also talk to you about some of our reports and forms that we use to help track assessment timeframes. Next slide, please.
Will this be irritating if it's like this?
Oh, somebody's not muted.
Go ahead, I muted her.
Okay, thank you. In terms of our assessment coordinator, as most of you know, this is a position that was created, I believe, 2 years ago. So we strategize really the best use of our assessment coordinator, especially in such a large geographical area that we serve. We have class sites that are ours. apart from each other. So one of the things we did a couple years ago is we created all of our student folders online so that anybody can access student folders and student attendance at any time. It's kept in our OneDrive folder. So the assessment coordinator has access to all classes, so she's able to help in terms of monitoring post-test needs, which has helped because sometimes just having that second set of eyes is really helpful. She also attends our student support coordinator meetings. We have monthly meetings with student support coordinators, and at those meetings, she's able to talk with the student support coordinators about some of the students that have post-testing needs. We really try to start to focus thinking about post-testing at that 40 hours, whether it's ABE or ESL, just to get those students on the radar for the instructors. The other thing she does is she will send reminder emails as students get closer and closer to needing a post-test. And in those emails, she really tries to focus on helping the instructors to think about what tests the students need to be tested on, and then some instructional strategies that the people should be thinking about. Another thing she does is she works closely with our data quality specialist as a second set of eyes for data entry for post-test. Because we are so large and there's so many different class sites, it helps to have somebody else looking to make sure post-tests are getting entered. That's something we also do at program improvement team meetings, but it's just added that extra layer of data checking. And then the final thing that she does is she does provide instructional supports to all of our instructional staff in terms of planning instruction based on diagnostic results. She has spent some time really developing some great resources and instructional plans in looking at the CASAS goals especially. And then she also helps target some of the supplemental distance that can be used. We use Essential Education's CASAS Goals Academy, and then also Aztec. Next slide.
So as Rachel mentioned, my name is Chelsea Snyder. I am one of the head coordinators here at IU1 in our adult education program. And so Rachel had mentioned that all of our student folders are kept online in our OneDrive system. And so because of that, she said all of our teachers and student support coordinators have access to those. All of the tests that we administer, or the majority of the initial tests that we administer for new students, are e-tests. And we print off, or I should say save, the TOPS Pro reports, and we specifically use the individual skills profile that really gives like a rough outline of how they performed on the test. It obviously includes their score, EFL level, and then a little breakdown of the questions that they got correct and incorrect in grouping. And then the student competency performance report is the other report that we use regularly. And that actually is a breakdown of which questions they got right and wrong and what area those are in. So those two reports are saved by whoever administers that initial assessment and added into the student's folder, so that before a student begins instruction, which typically we have a 2 to 3 day window before they start. So the instructor has time to review those reports and make a plan for the student based off of that, so that we can be incorporating the need to improve those EFLs through their instruction. The second one, continuing instructor review of reports. Like I said, we make sure that the teachers are very familiar with how to use those reports. And then our assessment coordinator is also looking at those to help instructors with materials. We do try to make sure that we are incorporating some sort of CASAS related skills and material into each class session. A lot of our instructors will do some sort of daily warm-up drill, or like a minute 5, where it is some sort of material related to that assessment, so that they're constantly practicing those activities. And then, like Rachel had mentioned as well, we purchased this year the CASAS Tutor in Aztec, which is a program that our students are very familiar with and have used for several years. And then our students also use the CASAS Score Boost materials as well outside. Next slide, please. And then another big thing that we did, we started this several years ago, but within our daily attendance sheet that all of our instructors use to monitor and track attendance, you can kind of see the names are colored out, but you can see the green and yellow blocks. And so once a student meets enrollment, their color changes from white to green. But then once that student hits 25 to 30 hours in the program, their block will change to yellow, alerting the instructor that, hey, that student is getting closer to, needing a post-test to what that minimum hour is. And at that time, teachers then are, or know to go and check data in the access system to see if there's any supplemental distance, if that student is close. That way that we're getting those assessments done at a certain time. And then right beside those green and yellow blocks, there's a white block. In that block, there's the option to, if a student is exited, there's that. If they transfer out, there's that. But then also if they've made a gain. So that way, if a student has a post-test already done, we can just check if there was a gain made. And it's a real quick way for the instructor and student support coordinator to see when they see those hours, if an assessment has already been done. Next slide, please.
Okay, and just some additional considerations that we have been focusing on this year in 23-24. We do utilize a lot of the reports and access, so we make sure that all staff is trained on that and is able to review their class reports. As Chelsea mentioned, one of the things that we have to remember is that supplemental distance hours don't always show up on our attendance sheets. So utilizing those reports in eData gives a one-shot picture of total instructional hours for our instructors to look at. We also have students transfer in our program. Maybe they are in a face-to-face class and they need to move to a remote class. So that allows, by able to look in eData, that allows the instructor to see those total instructional hours. As I mentioned earlier, we've had a large increase in the ESL population. So our in-house and our tutor trainer this year, because a lot of our ESL students are served by our tutoring program and our tutors, they've been working in tutor roundtables to help tutors look at diagnostic tools and resources that work for those skills. I believe that Marina was mentioning on that CASAS life and work. The other thing that we've realized is remote assessment. It sometimes can be intimidating to students. We don't find that they perform as well. So we really only use remote assessment as a last option. We try to schedule students' remote tests as close to their home as possible so they don't have to come to a site. We'll find a library or somewhere close so that we can go out and test them face-to-face as opposed to remote. And then something new we started this year is that we're realizing that sometimes you don't get EFL gains because those students leave between 20 to 25 hours. So they're never there long enough to be post-tested. So we started just this month, so I'll know later if this has been effective, but we're starting to send postcards out to those students who left around that 25-hour mark to see if we can get them back into the program and get them in long enough to receive a post-test. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, well, I want to thank all four of our presenters today. I think they are all approaching it slightly differently, but there are some similarities. I want to go back to the chat and see if we have any questions. So someone asked Allison, do the classes that she talked about operate on the same schedule? And, how often do her classes meet? She said the classes all have the same start time, but they have morning, afternoon, and evening. So that's how the instructors are able to pair up. I don't think she answered the question. Allison, do you want to unmute yourself and answer the question about the Burlington English sessions? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Sure.
It says, are your Burlington English sessions part of the regular class or as a separate session?
So our classes are we meet 3 to 4 days a week for ESL. And they are sometimes, if it depends on the instructor, sometimes they're part of the regular session. We mostly use it for supplemental distance learning. And we're using a lot of the listening activities to prepare for the listening CASAS exam. So hope that answers your question, Mercedes.
If not, Mercedes, shoot Allison an email. Someone was telling Gretchen that the instructor monthly report is amazing, and asked about the database, and Lori let her know that they're using Salesforce, and that Salesforce was an investment for them. I mean, I think it's fairly expensive maybe, but they like knowing where they are in real time all the time. So they're data junkies. Do we have any other questions for the presenters at this time? You can certainly unmute if you want to and ask a question before we move on. I'll sit here for a minute quietly. Okay, well, we're just getting accolades in the chat. People are saying, great, thanks, terrific, thanks for sharing. So I think we'll move on to my portion of the presentation. I think, as you know, Amanda's not here today. So, the inmates are running the asylum to a certain extent. But she does know what I'm going to talk about. And so I think we're good. Okay. So because the presentations today were about, how some of our high performers from 22-23, achieved their higher levels of EFL gains, I thought it might be interesting to talk about measurable skill gains and post-testing data. And I got this spreadsheet from Octave that was shared by a staff member at Octave. And it uses data from program year 21, but I think it's still going to illustrate for you the point of how the post-testing and other factors can affect the MSG. What I want to say is, though, before I show this spreadsheet and talk about the data, I do want to caution you that this is not meant as an instruction to post-test out of time frame. You still need to think about all the things that the presentations today talked about: continuous improvement, increasing retention, examining data, improving instruction. I think they gave you some great ideas about all of that. So what I'm about to show you is not meant to be an instruction to go ahead and post-test out of time frame. And I want to remind everyone that in policy C100, we list the targets for the primary indicators of performance, and for measurable skill gains, your goal is 48%. And for table 4B, it's 70%, right? And table 4B is the percentage of students with a gain out of the universe of students with post-test. So it's not out of all of your students. It's just the students who have been post-tested. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm going to slide a spreadsheet over the screen, and I'm going to walk you through it, and we're going to talk about how post-testing can have a effect on MSG. Can Mary Wilson unmute and tell me if you can see the spreadsheet?
You're good. You can see it.
Great, thank you. Okay. So this spreadsheet, as I said, was created by a staff member at Octave, and this is for PY21 data as we submitted it to the NRS. For the purposes of this exercise, we're going to assume that all other gain types stay constant. We're just playing around with MSG from pre-post. So, the other gain types 4, 5, and 6 and secondary credentials, we're not going to talk about them. We're just going to be talking about the effect of the pre-post on the MSG rate. So this first table shows that PA's MSG rate was 34.4%, and you can see this down here at the bottom in the center. I'm kind of circling it with my mouse so you can see it here. It's in the yellow column. That was our MSG rate that we reported for that year. And then if you slide over here, you'll see that our 4B number was 56 so almost 57%. And if you remember, you just heard Rachel talking a minute ago at IU1, she gave us hers from last year, and that was 87%. So, our average is lower than our high performers are getting. So that's just a piece of information for you. And then you can see here that both of these numbers were achieved with a post-test rate of 53.6%. So that's sort of our base, right? That's what we reported. So I'm going to scroll the spreadsheet down to the interesting part. This spreadsheet here, this portion of the spreadsheet will, as I change the estimated post-test rate up here, it will change these numbers down here. So I currently have in here 45%. We're going to go back and we're going to put our post-test rate in, which is 53.6%. So I'm going to enter 53.6. And then you can see that our current MSG rate appears. And you can see there's some differences between ABE and ESL. They're very small. Don't worry about those. What those differences are telling us, just so you know, the reason the ESL ones are negatives and the ABEs are positive, that has to do with the other MSG types that are reported. And that just right there shows you how important those post-secondary forms are that we ask you to send in. That's the difference they're making, right? It may look like small potatoes, but that could push us over the top. So, you know, keep sending them in. It really does, you know, affect. So let's see what happens if we up our estimated post-test rate. What happens to our numbers there? So, you know, let's go to 65%. So if we were getting a 65% post-test rate, that puts our potential MSG rate up to a little over 40%. So even at 65%, we're still not meeting our 48% target, right? We have to up this, actually, I believe, let me try 75%, but I still think that's not even quite enough. We're still below target at 75%. We have to get our post-test rate up to 79% to meet our target of 48% gains. And the thing about that is that's a pretty high number. Now, you know, IU1 talked about their 4B number being 87%, but the post-test rate is a little different, right? You would have to post-test 79% of all the students that walked into your program. That I don't know. To me, that seems like that would be difficult, and maybe we need to look for other solutions. That's a pretty high rate of post-testing. So, you know, how are other states kind of doing this? What's going on with other states? You know, let's look at another state and compare ourselves, not in a negative way, but just compare ourselves and see what they're doing. So for the purpose of this exercise, I picked Kentucky because they serve fewer students than we do, but around the same amount. And they're doing pretty well. So, you know, this data is from Kentucky. And you can see that, you know, I don't know what their target is, but they're meeting our target. So, you know, this is how they would meet our target if this were the same target for them. They have a very high 4B number, you know, the percentage of post-tested participants that get a gain at 72%. But the rate of their post-test overall is what I would say is quite low. It's under 38%. So they're only post-testing 38% of the students who come in, and they're still achieving almost 48% in EFL gains. What that means is they have a higher rate of gains among post-tested students than we do. So the question sort of becomes how, you know, yeah, we have to increase our post-testing, but we also have to increase the percentage of post-test students who get a gain. Increased post-testing alone isn't going to get us there. I think some of the presentations today showed you all the data tracking they do, and that's them ensuring that they get every last student who should be post-tested gets a post-test, right? So they're doing everything they can from the data perspective, and we should all be doing that. But they also talked about all the other things they're doing. So the question becomes then, you know, I'm showing you Kentucky here. Where do we rate nationally? And for that, I'm going to show you another spreadsheet that I have. This table was created from information from our performance history for the past several years. So, and every year Octave provides to the state director, Amanda, our quartile rankings, right? So there's, they divide all of the reporting states into quartiles, and the fourth quartile is the one you want to be in. That's the top one. That's the best performers. The first quartile is the lowest one, the poorer performers. And you can see, looking at this, that in the past, 8 years or so ago, we were in that third quartile, right? We were up there. We were above middle, above medium. We were ranked 25th out of 57 states. And the reason there's 57 states is because we all know there's 50 states, but there's also Guam and the Federated States of Micronesia, I think, and Puerto Rico, so there are other, Washington, D.C., they count as states for the purposes of this exercise. So we were doing pretty good. We were, solidly in the middle, maybe even a little above the middle. And then you can see, just in the past couple years, we've just, we took out the pandemic years, but, the recovery years here, we just really have not recovered. We're down in the first quartile now. And if you look at 22, 23, and you look at our overall quartile rank, we're 51 out of 57. There are 50 places that are, sort of doing better than we are in terms of their overall MSG reporting. So, why? Why did we have this huge drop? I know people say the pandemic, but my opinion is that we can't blame this on the pandemic. Every state was affected by the pandemic. And we need to solve this. And I really think it's going to take all of us to do it. I'm not blaming one person or one group, but I wanted to be real with you and show you this data so you can see where we are. I want to show you some performance reports now that I think, just as examples, I've taken identifying information off of them. There's nothing, nobody's gonna, And the reason I want to show them to you is because we really have very few programs currently who are making their targets. I'm talking about current year data. Some programs are doing really poorly, and I don't know if it's their data entry or if they're actually doing that poorly. And even our medium performing programs are still fairly below target for this time of year. So I'm going to show you those performance reports now. And the advisors use these performance reports pretty regular. I'm sorry, I am over time. I hope you can all stay for 5 more minutes. I promise to try to talk a little faster. I apologize for that. But if you have to go, this is being recorded, so you can always, listen to the recording later and shoot me any questions that you have. Anyway, the performance reports are in the template. The advisors look at these every month, every week, sometimes, to kind of see, to get a sort of baseline look at what you're doing. And then looking at that data will send us in a direction to dig deeper. So we don't just look at the performance report. We look at the performance report, say, hey, why is this happening? And then we dig in further to the data. And I think for those of you that aren't doing it, I believe that is what you should be doing. Okay, so here we go on the performance reports. You may recognize yourself, but nobody else is going to, because like I said, we took the names off. So I'm going to start with 2 of the lower performers, and then we'll end on a high note looking at some of the higher performers this year. And I know these numbers are super small. I tried pretty hard to make them as big as I could, but maybe people are going to have trouble seeing them. This is from data I pulled yesterday morning. So this is as up to date, other than it being this morning. So the agency on the top of the screen, the table on the top of the screen, you can see they're a little bit over 50% enrolled. which is a little low for February, but it's not terrible. It's, it's in the realm. They've enrolled 180 students, so that's pretty good. 186 students, and they've got an average of 40 hours. Their retention average is 40 hours. But they only have 12 post-tested students. And, if I were the administrator, I'd be looking at this and saying, is this really the only 12 students that were ready for post-testing? Because with a retention average of 40 hours, you've got to imagine that they have more than 12 students, because that's an average, right? There are students that are going to have many more hours than that. So I would imagine there's more than 12 students that are ready for post-testing. So that would be the absolute first thing I would look at. And I think the second thing I would look at on this is looking at how many people have walked through their door. 321 people have walked through their door and said, hey, I'm interested in adult ed. And they've only managed to convert 186 of them to enrolled. And that's a fairly significant number. That's like 100 and, I don't know, 100. Oh, don't make me do math, 135 or something like that. So, those are the things that I would, if I were the administrator of this program, those are the things that I would definitely be digging into sort of immediately. If we look at the program on the bottom here, they've enrolled 195 students. They are 89% enrolled. So that's really great for this time of year, right? So now what you got to focus on is, the students that you have, getting gains from them and improving services to them. They also have average hours of around 40, and they've only post-tested 2 people. And I don't understand that, because there have to be more than 2 people. So I don't know if this is a data entry issue or if they've really only post-tested 2 people. But either way, if I were the program administrator of this program, I would be very concerned. I'd be looking probably at every process I had in place with my staff to find out what the problem is and where the problem was at. My pit would be working overtime for sure. So I think, with an average of 40 hours, my opinion is that they would have more than a single digit number of students who are ready to post-test. And, again, if this is a data entry issue, that's also really not good for you, because again, the advisors are using we're using these reports, right? We're using this data to think about, future planning. So, please look at these things and dig into them more. And if you need help with that, call your advisor or call Michael at the MIS project, and we can give you some ideas. So now let's move on to some really good ones, or ones that I think are doing well this year. And again, I have 2 examples for you. And I really wanted to end on this sort of positive note. These 2 programs are doing better than most of the rest on an overall basis. The top one is an urban program, and the bottom one is a rural program. And you can see that the urban program has already met enrollment. They have a high retention average. They've got a 70-hour retention average. Their table 4B, if you look at ed gains out of the number of, they have 104 ed gains out of 173 post-tests. That comes out to like 60%. So they're well on their way to that sort of 70 range for table 4B. That's the target. And their overall EFL gains are at 25%, which is pretty good for this time of year. They probably need to work now. If I were their administrator, I'd be saying, okay, we're fully enrolled. We'll still take new students if they come in and they need our services, but we really want to focus on improving with the students we have. We're contracted to serve 400 students. Let's give those 400 students the best experience possible. So do they need more services? Do they need better services? Should you be doing second post-tests when they get to, the second set of hours? Probably. And then if we look at the rural program below, now you can see that they're a little over 50% enrolled. And, that's probably a little low this time of year, but, we find this in rural programs a lot, that their enrollment lags a little bit. And that's okay, because look, even with that, look at their EFL gains, right? Their ed gains are at 54% in February, and their table 4B is at 88%. So now what they have to do, if I were their administrator, what I would be saying is, how do I keep doing this really strongly as I'm achieving the other 47% of my enrollment? How do I make sure that everything we're doing is going to work for the rest of the incoming students? So again, that's what I would be looking at if I were this program administrator. So, what's the solution here? And I don't know, right? I'm an advisor and I have my ideas. I'm not, as you all know, I'm not the be all and end all, right? But we have, as I said, we've got to solve this, and we've got to solve this together. We have to improve together. It's not any one person or one agency. This is statewide. This is the advisors have to participate. Administrators have to participate. Your staff has to participate. And it's not just about tracking data better, right? I think you heard that in the presentations today. It's about services. All of all of these factors are like intertwined, right? So you have to look at your data and figure out where you can improve on your data, but you also have to look at everything else, your processes, your post-testing processes, how you track student readiness, what's the quality of instruction, right? And I know that quality of instruction is a hard one because people are having a hard time getting teachers right now. And it's a tough thing to look at your program and say, gee, maybe our instructional quality is not that great. That doesn't feel so good. But I think you really, as program administrators, you really need to start looking at that. Are you giving students enough support to persist? What's the barrier? What's the barrier support? And I will say that one thing I've noticed, and this is just kind of I don't have any hard data on this. This is something I noticed as I review grants, right? Because I look at grants and I look at the program data, and the intensity of services has dropped. Ever since we've removed that requirement that classes are held for at least 5 hours a week, I've noticed that while some of you have taken that have interpreted that to mean I'm going to have some classes that are 10 hours and some that are 5 and some that are 3, so that you're presenting for your students a variety of options, depending on your student needs and availability. But I've seen other programs who just dropped all their class hours below 5, right? So it's one thing to make shorter classes available to students who need it, but it's another to not have expectations for your students. And I have actually talked to some programs that have some pretty unique ways of incentivizing attendance. So I don't know, maybe we should have a attendance incentivization presentation at some point. And there are probably other reasons that I'm not even touching on here. And I want to leave you with this finally. I hope that you didn't take this as a complete downer. I know we can do this. We can improve, right? Even the programs who are doing less well right now have creative staff and good ideas, and you as a program administrator just need to capitalize on that, right? This wasn't meant to make you feel bad. It was meant to show you the reality of where we are. And I was hoping to sort of galvanize you into action. So I hope that's what I've done here. All right, I'm going to stop talking. It's 10 after. I'm going to take questions though. So anybody who wants to stay, feel free to stay. And I'm going to go back in the chat and answer questions. So Dawn, I don't know if your comment was directed to me that this has been crazy enlightening, but thank you.
Yes,
Mary Mingle said we need to adjust what we're teaching to closely match what is tested. And I think, Mary, you hit a good point. If you notice in the presentations, there were a couple presentations today where they talked about the competencies. Some people were using different tests in the TABE, but they talked about the competencies informing their instruction. So I think that's a point well taken. Sue Klauser wants to know if I've met with other states and see what best practices are going on, maybe at COABE. Yeah, I think, no, I have not had those conversations. They do presentations at the national level sometimes, and Amanda writes things down and then talks to the three of us about them. But yeah, maybe we do need to get maybe we need to talk to some programs from other states who have similarities to Pennsylvania programs and have them talk. That's a good idea, Sue. I like that. Laura Zangari is very curious what assessments are being used. Anything being used that we don't, like TABE Class C? Great question, Laura. I don't know. I don't know which states use which assessments. I can find out, but I don't know off the top of my head. And then Lori Sobolski from Goodwill Southwestern Pennsylvania talked about that they did adjust what they were teaching to the assessment. It was part of the presentation that got cut off today, and that's my fault. I didn't have those slides. They spend time pulling the TABE profile reports and finding what the common skills are that are missed and things of that nature. So thank you for that, Lori. And then Laura Zangari said, you know, retention's still a big problem. People who leave before post-testing or job hopping and dealing with life. Not an excuse, but definitely a problem. I agree with that. But the thing, I don't disagree with that at all. But why are we so low? Other states, I mean, people are the same. I don't want to say people are the same everywhere, but our students across the country, adult basic education students, face those same barriers. So although I do think it's something we have to look at, I don't think it's something we can say, well, that's the reason. It might be maybe how we're dealing with it is part of the problem. I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but I'm glad that you're strategizing about it, Laura. That's great. Sharon thanked us. People are thanking for the presentation. James said that different states have different interpretations of sufficient intensity and duration. Iowa requires 8 hours per week. So see, you thought we were tough requiring 5. Iowa requires 8. Laura mentioned that the larger percentage of ESL versus GED, you know, we need to visit getting EFL and ESL classes. It takes much longer, and how can we motivate students? I would agree with that. And I would add to that, that typically what we see because I was an ESL teacher and Amanda was an ESL teacher, and Alice, who's no longer working with us, was an ESL teacher. And what we have found in our practice was that it does take longer to get the gain, but they persist better. They stay longer. They'll come and come and come and come and never go away. I mean, they really, you know, they're focused. So that is part of it for sure. Yeah, Dawn, good point. Got to look at we can control and control it. And then Cindy from RAC posted a comment that the PIT's been working on strategies. So good, your PIT's working overtime like I suggested. You've been using profile reports to inform instruction and working on test taking strategies and being creative. So that's you know, that's all the comments that are in the chat right now. If anybody would like to, I'm available. So I'm here. I don't have to log off. Anybody who wants to unmute, feel free to unmute and ask a question, and I will try to answer it.
Hi, Christine, it's Susan Klauser. I just wanted to comment. I put that in the comments, what I've been doing this week. Every February, I pull our enrollment report and I start sharing that with students. I visit classes February, March, April, May, and I really engage the students in sort of like being a part of sharing in our data success. So
Right.
I tell them where we are with enrollment. And then I have a conversation about average hours and post-test. So I said, here's my personal goal for our agency. And I say to them, even from the highest level ESL learner to the lowest level, you can still engage them. And I say, how can you help me, so we all succeed? And, they realize, they say, we can come to class every day. We can come to class on time. We stay for the full class. We do our homework and our SDL, it's just, having those conversations, I think, involves them in the success of our program. And just knowing that they contribute to that. We can have the best grant, the best well-written grant. We can have an awesome staff, but we still need our students' participation in order to succeed.
I think that's a really important point, Sue. And I'm glad that you're doing that. The students are part of the equation, and we can't, force the solutions on them, kind of. So I think that point is a point well taken. Share what you need with the students, explain to them, share the data. Yeah, great idea. We have another comment in the chat. It would be interesting to look at the data collection and reporting systems used by the high-performing states. I think PA would see higher gains if we had an e-data system that could create high-quality reports like the one shown today by the individual agencies. So yeah, Tim, you're talking about like the data collection system that Literacy Pittsburgh has purchased, Salesforce, and you have one that you're using. That I'm assuming also create some of those reports. So that's a comment well taken. I would say I don't disagree with that, and it would be interesting. Like, are the really high performing states using some of these purchased products as opposed to e-data, which is older. So point well taken. I'll take that. Anyone else have anything to say before we log off for the day? I know this has run really long and I'm so sorry, but I was excited to share this with you and really get this conversation going. All right, so I want to once again thank the presenters. Mary Mingle, you got a question? This will be the last one I take.
Yeah, well, just for the people that are still on. So we seem to have two kinds of students. We have students that come in and they have left school since COVID, disillusioned, but they were on grade level when they left, or they're ready to take that test. And for us to try to hold them to 40 hours or 50 hours, it's not going to happen. They're going to leave our class. They're going to do what they want. And when we get students like that are coming in, their TABE scores are high, I feel like we have to make a choice. What's the best outcome for them? And that would be to gain their high school equivalency. And of course, then we have other students who, with their TABE scores, they're going to need more time. So it's likely we're going to post-test them. They're the ones that are going to give us the hours. Is anyone else running into this where you've got students who are way more prepared, and to try to get them to reach 40 hours, it just wouldn't happen?
But again, Mary, you can post-test out of range if you have a reason, right? You put a note in the file.
That's true. That's true. I don't know that they make the gain though. Like they'll come in doing math at the D level, and I don't know if they can still pass the test, which is frustrating because I really do believe that passing the test needs to be needs to be more rigorous, to pass the test.
Here's the thing. That's an MSG for us anyway.
Yeah.
So in that instance, it's okay because that's still an MSG. You only get to count one per student. So.
That's kind of we're trying to be very strategic with our time and who are we investing what efforts in. And like I said, students are free to go test whether we have them for 12 hours or not, or whatever. So it does become sort of a customer service thing too. Plus our partners, I can tell you at our CareerLink, our out of school youth programs, adult programs, referring, they want people through as fast as they can. They have a very limited window. So if they refer and they don't want us messing around. If they feel like we're messing around, they just don't refer people to us. So we get
I think Mary brings up a good point. There are factors. There are factors.
It's a dynamic.
I didn't hit all the factors today. There are factors. But I guess I'll leave you with this parting thought. There are factors and there are reasons, but we have to figure them out. We've got to figure it out. right? So at the
Mhm.
bottom line,
Yep.
you've got to be creative and you got to figure it out. And it sounds like a lot of you are. So I want to thank everybody who attended today. I especially want to thank the 50 of you who stayed on for this lengthy presentation. The presentation will be posted. The slides are already up, but I'm going to have to change them to put the rest of the slides from Literacy Pittsburgh that I'm missing for some reason. And the transcript and the video will be posted probably by tomorrow or the day after. So thank you all for attending, and I'm going to turn the recording off now.
Thank you, Christine.